what I love often in working in this kind of environment is the freedom of a very open brief. In advertising, we say give people the freedom of a very tight brief. And Gustav has really just said to me, he's painted me the framework and said, come and talk to the guys about teams and catalyzing your team. And so I've prepared a lot of stuff, most of which I guess we probably won't get to because we're small enough, we're intimate enough to have conversations and questions and things coming out of left field. But a little bit about my background. So January last month, I've been on the speaking circuit for 26 years, which is a little bit ridiculous if you think about it.
You started at age 5.
What is interesting is I started going grey at the age of 23. And my 3-year degree at Tucky's was the best 5 years of my life. And then I spent 2 years lecturing, 1 year in the geography department, 1 year in the phys ed department. So now you're probably going, oh God, we've got a phys ed teacher talking to us about leadership and management. But in the second year, lecturing in the sports science department, I walked out of the sports center one day and the receptionist called me up. She said, Eric. I'm like, yeah. She says, who does your hair? I'm like, what do you mean? I just go to the barber at Brooklyn Circle and we just do a buzz cut on number 3. She goes, no, those highlights. And so literally, when I started speaking and consulting at the age of, 28, I looked 35.
And that doesn't mean a highlight.
And so I think, you've all heard, there are hundreds of speakers who've climbed a big mountain and talk about climbing the mountain. And I think what kind of makes my approach a little bit different is I've got multiple ascents of several high mountains because I lead expeditions. I have an expedition travel business called Explore, and I literally take normal people to cold, high, distant places, which lends itself to a whole different set of challenges because when you go and climb Kinney for the first time, it's novel, it's an experience, you probably don't realize how difficult it is. And so you approach it with a different mindset as you would when I'm taking people there for the week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however long it takes. Everyone's life is essentially in my hands. And I know what's coming. The number of times I've been lying in a tent at just, around 6,000 meters, sleeping with an elephant on my chest, feeling miserable, cold, hypoxic, going, what the hell am I doing here? And I'm never coming back to this place. That happens every time. But I can't let that show because I've got people who have paid a fair amount of money. But also, what I do as a leader in that ultimately affects, intensely affects their experience. So that's the one challenge. The other challenge is we go into these environments as complete strangers. In many cases, the guys would have met, so I've developed this process leading up to a mountain or to an expedition where we do try and get together. We maybe do some training sessions. We do some Zoom calls. I want to give them as much information as possible to be able to make their own decisions on the mountain without them making their own decisions on the mountain, if that makes sense. So I'll tell you 1 or 2 stories around that a bit later on. But how I prepare these guys to arrive as a bunch of strangers with a single purpose in mind, and then suddenly realize that there's a degree of teamwork that needs to happen. That's really fascinating. And so what I want to take you through is just a couple of ideas and concepts of the things that we've developed. I used to have a partner in Explore, and we've just split the 2 businesses that we were involved in because being involved in both was too much for Alex, for Alex's wife. And they're moving to the States this year anyway. So over the years of working together and doing that, we've kind of developed this process of finding, and we never intrinsically codified it to say, well, this needs to happen and then that needs to happen. we just kind of stumbled upon this concept of how we can get guys to work together. How do we frame this whole experience to allow us to get more people to summits than the average on the mountains that we guide? The byproduct of that is, in all the years we've been doing it, we've brought everyone home alive with all their fingers and all their toes, which is, it's a nice accolade, particularly for their families. Yes. And so, I mean, you mentioned this. I'm going to jump around. And so the mountain I'll get that right out the way. I've not summited Everest. Been there, not summited. If it happens from now on, it happens. If it doesn't, it's not a major piece in my life to say I've got to stand on that particular piece on this planet. But my favorite mountain to guide is the second highest of the 7 summits. It's a mountain called Aconcagua in South America, right on the border between Argentina and Chile. And what makes Aconcagua quite interesting is it's the highest mountain outside of Asia. So all those 14,000 meter peaks, all the high Himalayan peaks and the Karakorams in Pakistan, Aconcagua sits outside of that. It's in the southern hemisphere. So when we climb Ac in January every year, we didn't go this year, if we summit, there's this 99.99% chance that you're the highest person standing on the planet. Because the crazy Norwegians aren't climbing the northern hemisphere peaks in winter anymore, because it's kind of been done. But 2016, we had just a horrible expedition on Aconcagua. It's 3 weeks. And the storm came in, 2 of our tents blew out of Camp 1, mine and my co-leader, Alex, because the experts should know how to pitch tents. We lost food, we lost gear. We then get stuck in base camp for 3 days.
They call it the snack, what do they call this? Because that wing is...
They call it the viento blanco, the cold, the white wind. And because Aconcagua is so exposed, I'll show you a photograph a little bit later on, you've got this wind coming off the Pacific across Chile that immediately gets thrust up, because of the Andes mountain range. When I've been at summit camp with 100+ km/h winds, and we knew that was coming. So we kind of moved our summit day up one day so we can get back down. And we got back to the tents about 8 o'clock at night. And by 9:30, this wind started. And it was like sleeping inside a jet engine, not in the plane, like next to the engine. So you're exhausted because you've been up since 3 o'clock this morning. You've ascended just over 1,000 meters. You've stood on this little piece of the planet. And then you've descended back down and you get there like 8 o'clock at night. And you're smashed. So you maybe have something to eat. And this particular one, you just crawl into your sleeping bag. And then this wind comes up and you fall asleep. And then you wake up every now and then because you're hypoxic, because your blood oxygen level drops. And I remember waking up going, it must be like midnight now. And I look at my watch and it's 10:20. And you've slept for like an hour. And then you try and fall asleep again. You wake and you go, surely it's almost time to get up now and sunrise. And it's midnight. You get no sleep because you've got this constant noise. Anyway, so 2016, so we then go up summit attempt to Camp 1, this lady Gerda. Gerda, myself, and the guy named Wayne sharing a tent. And we get stuck in Camp 1 for 2 nights. Another snowstorm. And the morning we go up to Camp 2, Gerda wakes up. She says, I'm done. What do you mean you're done? We've been here for almost 3 weeks. She says, mentally, I'm done. I can't. So we can do one or two things. We can convince somebody to go. But if they're not invested in it mentally anymore, there's very little point in getting them to go. That's like the one side. The other side is someone who just refuses to quit. But for their own health and safety and life, we've got to turn them around. I'll tell you a story about that later as well. But anyway, Gerda gets there. She goes, I'm done. Quite happy to go down to base camp. fly back. And she says, the mountain's not going away. I'll come back next time. 3 years later, she goes back. And on a rest day, we've been up to Camp 2 to acclimatize, come back down. I came down faster than my team to have a shower, and their showers were booked for the next day. I'm standing outside the tent. Now I'm really enjoying the late afternoon sun. I'm feeding. I had my first shower in 10 days, feeling like $1 million. Leonie walks past me, another lady. She says, Shadow just broke her leg. We're like, no, we don't joke about stuff like that on the mountain. She says, no, genuine. Shadow just broke her leg. And on this path, the last little hairpin corner into base camp, Shadow puts her left foot down between 2 rocks. She puts her right foot down at an angle, her right foot slips, talking action on her left leg, tibia, fibula, gone. One way to get a helicopter ride out of base camp, and then Discovery flew a first class back to Joburg for an operation. But that was it. And it kind of, I often start a talk with this, and we've probably all heard this African proverb, is there's something around being able to build camaraderie, to build a team with a common purpose almost instantly. And that's what I end up having to do more often than not. And on mountains, the purpose is not to summit. The people like Everest, we will, if we go back to Everest, we will not go south side. We'll go north side through Tibet. Because Nepal, you've all seen those photos, people queuing up at Hillary Step. Last year, the Nepalese authorities sold 470 odd permits to climb Everest out of Nepal. There is a 4-day window split in 2. For these 470 people, however many are left at summit attempt, to get through one piece of path. So no wonder they're queues like it. But all the photos I'm going to show you are either ones that I've taken or of me in things. So I don't know if you recognize the guys in that photo, obviously the fearless leader at the front. But then walking with me there, Makai and Tini, Mondi Zondeki, and Lance Klusner. So in 2019, I had this idea to cross Makhadik Pans in Botswana unsupported, unassisted. Because every now and then I look for a personal challenge for myself. And I think that's sort of the one thing around leadership is how often are we still challenging ourselves? Or do we get into this environment where we have a track record, we've built a good business, we're leading a good business, and we're so consumed by the daily challenges that we no longer look for personal challenges to see how we stretch. So I try and look for an adventure challenge personally. So in 2017, I put a team together. We set a record for doing the 9 peaks, the highest peak in each of the 9 South African provinces. I tried it again in 2018 with a mixed team with Mrs. South Africa and another lady, and I got pneumonia. So 2019, I had this idea to cross Makhadik Pans unsupported, unassisted. In other words, drag everything I need to survive for its 200 Ks. So probably a day and a half, 2 days. Carrying everything with me. Then a Proteas cricketer heard about it. I don't know how, but Jacques Rudolph phones me. He goes, where do I sign up? It's not a sign up thing. It's just something I want to. No, but let's have a beer. Because no great adventures start with Coke Light and a salad. Anyway, so that was the idea. 2019, myself, Jacques, Kevin Peterson, and Dale State. We're going to do this. 2020 comes along. 2020, I'm in Aconcagua in January, Kili in February, Summit to Sea, bike ride. March, what happens? COVID lockdown. But I've still got this idea. So I found a guy who's helped me find sponsorship. And in the past, and we're on a Zoom call. He says to me, Eric, how many times can you walk 200 Ks? Could you do it 3 or 4 times? I'm like, I don't know. He says, but what do you think you can? I'm like, I don't know, but happy to try. On that call, he phones John Smith, the rugby captain. He says, John, could you get some mates to walk 200 Ks? John Smith's famous words, well, sure, how difficult could that be? And so in April 2020, we created what became the Battle of the Sports. And it was this like adventure playing field to see which team breeds the toughest sportsman. So we had team rugby, team soccer, team cricket, and team road running. And when I phoned Supersport in early May 2020, I said, this is the concept, would you broadcast it? They said, we'd broadcast the opening of an envelope. Because you can only watch Donald drop his bat so often and Stransky slot the World Cup kick. So we created this reality TV series, and in September, October 2020, I did 4 laps of 200 kilometers on Vermeulen in the Northern Cape to see which team could do this route the fastest. And
You went with each one.
I went with each team. So I was the expedition leader.
Don't you have a car?
No, I don't. But didn't I mention I own a Land Rover?
It's just all, you still got the key.
Yeah, no. See, no, and I'll show you a map about this a little bit later on. But this, again, just cemented that whole idea of here I am spending a couple of days with 3 ex-elite sportsmen who all know each other, who have a history, who have a culture. And I'm trying to fit in. And most of the guys I'd met, for brief moments when we did some filming we got in the end 70 odd hours on Supersport with 3 broadcasts and whatever. But each team we had a launch program, each team had a team introduction program, then there were 15-minute daily highlights while we were on there, and then a wrap up. And then, of course, like Survivor, the big award ceremony at the end. This whole idea of going together and understanding who does what and how we do that, how do we do that instantly, has kind of become quite profound, particularly in terms of businesses, because the way we build a business is we kind of just probably recruit in the wrong way. And I'll share an idea with that now. But adventures are tough. The places I go to are not easy, because if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And so often the reason you actually do that, and these are the photos you normally see on the summit, and everyone looks happy and smiling. Not to go on the top level. I was just, so I want to, it's a good song. I just want to point that out. You're absolutely right. And that's why I use this photograph. All right. So this was, 2025, 2023. January, a school phones me, Helpmaker College in Joburg. Eric, we believe you're the guy to speak to about climbing Kitty. I thought, sure. We want to take some kids. So I took a group of 16, mostly kids, a couple of parents, a couple of teachers, one old boy. And we went and summited Kitty. But people see these photos and they go, yes, that's an amazing adventure. And we forget how difficult it is. And the reason I share this story is that girl there, the laser pointer doesn't work on with the orange beanie sitting right next to me. Names will remain anonymous, but she was one of the first people to sign up. When we put it out to the school and we did an intro evening, she was the first one to sign up. We get to Mandara Huts on the first night. She comes to me, she says, I hate you. She used stronger words. I'm like, what do you mean? She says, you and my mother made me do this. I'm like, I didn't make you do anything. Neither did your mother. And she's upset, and this is terrible, and she's going down. She hates this. She hated every minute of it. I'm her worst, I'm her nemesis. The backstory to her signing up is her father passed away 2 years or so before. And he'd always had this dream of climbing Kilimanjaro. And when this opportunity came along, she signed up, and she's doing this in memory of her dad and to connect with her dad, which, it draws one to tears, and it's emotional. But I think we start every endeavor with this emotional connection of, this is going to be awesome, this is going to be fun, yes, it's going to be a challenge. And then we underestimate the hardships of the challenge once we get into it. Everything's fun when it starts. it doesn't stay that way. And this whole idea of resilience and perseverance, these are words that get thrown around a lot. And I think we always understand the gravity of those concepts, because climbing a mountain is difficult. I mean, you're literally going uphill for 6 days. So that first evening, she hates me, she hates life, she hates everything. So I had a chat with her. What did I say to her? I don't know. I can't remember. She just sat down and had a conversation. Because she can't go down. We're here now. What does she do for the next week in Mosh? There's not much to do. From that next day onwards, she was the front of the queue all day, every day. That she continued to bitch and moan. Yep. She became this embodiment of perseverance, of just putting one foot in front of the other, of leading herself. And through that, creating this example for others to follow. She was the young one of the, I think she probably was the youngest. There were 2 14-year-old girls. Her and the girl at the top there with the black beanie and the red Patagonia jacket. Those are the two. They were both 14 years old.
Just like the country calls it, under the actionable itself, done enough.
Yeah, I mean, having said that, though, because I mean, I've seen the young kids on that mountain coming down, me coming down, and I've seen they look like 10, 11 years old. It's, my twins are now 10. They're really going, Dad, when are we going to do mountain? But it's around how we recruit. So for something like this, often when people come to my information evenings about mountains, Kili, Aconcagua, whatever, they come to me after, or they ask the question and say, this doesn't sound like a lot of fun. You're supposed to be selling this. I'm like, yes, but if I sell this to you as a walk in the park and a beach holiday, that affects your experience on the mountain. Whereas if I sell it to you, if I front load it to say that this is a proper adventure, it's a proper challenge, right? Then that intrinsically affects how you approach it and your experience. On this trip, we had a guy, he's not in the photo because he didn't get to the summit. Every time, so we have this WhatsApp group and we train together when we can. And every time I posted the workout and reminded the guys of the training plan that I've given everybody, he'll post his CrossFit workout. And I don't know, something just said to me, this is going to be interesting. And he was always like half-wheeling. Always, if we've done something, he's done a better CrossFit workout. And he was just one of those really egotistical team members. Always joking, never taking anything seriously. At one point in the climb, I had to go to him and say, look, I need you to pull back. I need to tone down the way you're treating my staff. So on this, we had 16 climbers plus me. My support crew on this was around 42 people. Right? That's the size of these endeavors. And I will also never leave somebody alone on the mountain. So on summit day, we had 3 guys turn back at Stella Point. Then we get to, at Gilman's Point. 3 people turn around at Gilman's Point. We get to Stella, and 2 guys turn back. He was one of them.
Is Stella the rim, or was it just?
Stella is the rim. Then you climb a little bit more, you climb about another 150 vertical meters. Stella is the one just below the summit. Yeah. So Gilman's Point is just as you hit the crater rim, and then you go around a little bit more, you get to Stella Point, and then from Stella, you can actually see the summit. And it looks like it's just here, and it takes you another hour. So this guy turns around at Stella Point. With one of my guides, off he goes. I mean, it's so close, but it's so far. When you say 150 meters, it's a third of the way around the athletics track. But that's vertical meters. Right? So that's a 20-story building. Anyway, 2 days later, we're at our hotel doing our wrap-up dinner, and we give certificates to everybody. And Herman comes to me and goes, there's a mistake on my certificate. I'm looking at it and I'm reading it and I'm going, now I'm thinking, is his name misspelled? Or, I said to him, where's the mistake? He says, it says Stella Point. He made it to Uhuru Peak. I said, no, he didn't. He says, no, he did. I said, well, no, I saw you turn around with one of my guides at Stella. I said, I can ask my guides, or just give me can you show me a photograph? No, his phone died. I mean, there's a summit photo. I have one in my fit. And it was astounding to see that someone would now really argue over something that's really arbitrary. Because getting to Stella Point is a ridiculously awesome achievement. You've basically done everything you needed to do. The only thing that changes between Stella Point and Uhuru Peak is the photograph and what it says in your certificate. Your experience doesn't change. But it's around what it is that drives us, whether it's a process, whether it's an outcome, whether that outcome or that process feeds our ego, or whether we see different kind of opportunities in the endeavors that we undertake. And I said to you, how we get people on this, I think has a massive impact on how we experience it. And if we take it back into business and recruitment, how do we get people on board our businesses? So in that photograph, by the way, is in the area of the world called the Entikot, Arab al-Khali, the desert in the Middle East. And we do a 170-kilometer walk all along the Saudi Arabian border, fully catered, fully supported. This was, I think, 2013 we did this trip. But some of the world's highest sand dunes, and it's just absolutely incredible. It's such an amazing part of the world. But in 1912, while the world was going to war, there was a Brit named Ernest Shackleton who figured the race to the South Pole was won a couple of years earlier between Scott and Amundsen, and the Norwegian Roald Amundsen got there first. And when Scott and his team got to the South Pole and there was this Norwegian flag, every single one of them died trying to get home. There's the joke or the story. Every dead body on Everest was once a highly motivated individual. And it's true. You know, we start out motivated, fun, convinced that this is going to work. But how we adapt, how we change depends on whether we come home. And climbing a mountain, you know, so people often say, what do you do when you get to the summit? Well, number one, you feel shit. Like you feel proper cock. Then you enjoy the view, if there is one. You take a selfie. Then you turn around and you go right back down the same way that you came up. And what took you 3 weeks to get up takes you a day and a half to get down to the same place. Well, what's the point? And so expeditions aren't about going there. That's only halfway. The more important part is coming back. Not just for yourself, you know, but for everybody else. So in 1912, Ernest Shackleton had this idea to not just go to the South Pole, but to cross Antarctica. So from the start to the pole and then to the other side. So he got his ship, the Endurance, and the Endurance sailed to Antarctica and they never even started the journey. Because Endurance got trapped in pack ice, it was crushed, it sank. And Shackleton and his crew had to row 600 nautical miles eventually to Elephant Island in little lifeboats. Then they landed on the wrong side of Elephant Island. And Shackleton plus one other had to walk over the mountains, over the islands to the whaling station to summon help to get the rest of the team home. Every single one of that team lived, survived. And the Shackleton story is now told in business schools around the world about his leadership. And I think whilst there was great leadership, it started with how he got people on board. And this is how he got people on board. In 1912, this was the advert he placed in the Times of London. He said, men wanted. Right, who's in? Who's in? Okay, thank you. Okay, let's just do that. For a hazardous journey. Who's in? Okay. Small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger. Safe return doubtful. Who's in? Oh, now it changes a bit, right?
Speaks my life.
Wait, Gustav, it's not done. Before you take the photograph, it's not done. Honor and recognition in case of success. Right? But what an amazing way to front load this, to kind of screen people, not for skills, but for attitude, to get them on board this expedition. Right? Versus how we recruit people for our businesses today. Wanted to an entry-level accountant. Must have transport. When we recruit these days, we give almost no attention to the mindset, the attitude, the fiber of the people we want in our business. What if we were to recruit this way? What if we were to paint an absolute crap picture of what it's like working here? And get people on board like that. And now we start looking around purpose and not around an outcome or not around a skill. I mean, lots of the top leaders are saying these days that the problem with HR is that we recruit for skills, and we should, because anyone can learn any skill at any time. What if we start recruiting with a different lens in terms of attitude, mindset, resilience? And it then takes us to this concept of adventure. Please ask any questions or stories like as we go. So that photograph, one of mine, that's in the leaving a camp called Confluenza on the way to Aconcagua Base Camp. So we go up, we spend 3 nights at Confluenza, do acclimatization hikes, and then we take this 19-kilometer trip up to base camp, which is just a slog all day up the Hawkins Valley. So a fun story about Confluenza. On one of the trips, so we go in, we get to this little frontier town called Penitentes. And now we get there late afternoon, and we've normally got about an hour to now split our gear into 2 bags. A small bag that goes with us to Confluenza for the first 3 nights. And then our bigger bag with all the high altitude stuff that goes straight to base camp on mules. We don't see that bag until we get to base camp. And you know, they say that leaders always know what they're doing and they have all the experience and they seldom make mistakes. And so we're splitting these bags, and my colleague Alex opens a duffel bag. Now, so our sleeping bags are yellow and most of our jackets are black or red. So Alex opens a bag and he sees yellow, closes it, puts it in his Confluencia bag, that's his sleeping bag. And the other duffel bag, the other like stuff sack, that is his high altitude jacket, doesn't even open it, but that goes into base camp bag, off and goes. We get to Confluencia that afternoon. And I always say to guys, get into tent, we get into our tents, quickly open your sleeping bag so the down can puff up and it gives better insulation. Alex opens his sleeping bag and it's a down jacket. Hell no. So for 3 nights, we found him mule blankets to wrap around his legs. And he's got this yellow jacket. But it leads to this holiday. And we hear about adventure all the time. In early 90s, one of my lecturers and I started getting curious about this concept of adventure, and particularly its application within team building and business development and stuff. So we co-authored a book, very academic and so on. But one of the things that came out of this research that we did was that what is adventure? And we tend to associate adventure with an expedition, something outdoors, climbing a mountain, walking 200 kilometers. But in its essence, adventure is any endeavor of which the outcome is uncertain. And because of the rituals and routines we create for ourselves, we assume that most things in our lives today are certain. You know, we'll wake up tomorrow morning at the same time. And we're going to go through the same process and do the same things and go to take the same car to the same office, buy the same route, and do the same things, meet the same people. And we'll do it again tomorrow and the day after that and next week and next month. And we have this false sense of immortality, this false sense of permanence. But in essence, if COVID taught us anything, is like everything is uncertain. Our business could have a major roadblock tomorrow. Our life could have a major roadblock tomorrow. And so life is an adventure. But we tend to not realize it. We tend to like gravitate away from that because we shelter ourselves in these rituals and routines. And just when building a team, I want to put those rituals and routines in place because it gives us a sense of belonging. It gives us a sense of permanence. But we can't take the adventure of life and the adventure of business for granted because anything could change at any time. And if we think of like the millennials that are coming into the workforce today, like why don't they have resilience? Why do they battle with change? Because they don't embrace the sense of adventure. There's this school of thought that says that, you know, our parents were flippin' tough, right? They battled through apartheid and built businesses during apartheid when the world was against us. The work Gustav and I do in the Middle East. I mean, I've got one like team problem that takes teams on average 30, 40, maybe sometimes an hour to solve. Gave it to the guys in Tehran at a business school session I ran last year. 10 minutes, problem solved. I'm like, how did you do this? I go, well, we're so used to doing something with nothing, with limited resources, with the world being against us, that we have more resilience, we're more creative, we just know how to get stuff done. They can think out the box, they can build a team. And so there's this sense of tough times breed tough people. Tough people build good times. And good times build weak people. Right. And so if you think of, like my biggest concern, my kids are much younger than yours, but my biggest concern with my kids is they just get stuff too easily. Because, and their mom, my ex-wife the other day said to me, we're so fortunate to be able to give them everything. I'm going, yeah, that's nice. But what is it doing for them 10 years from now? And I had, my dad, incredibly successful. I went to top expensive private schools. But when it came to my sporting career, I was like the biggest head case ever. And that's probably why I do a lot of sports teamwork and mental stuff at the moment. Because when all my contemporaries were out training, practicing, I was like, it's going to have a beer. Because it came too easy. So when we pitch this whole thing around adventure, I like to say to the people that I guide, the guys coming on board teams, that this is not going to be easy. But that battle of the sports, the Turnco Walk, we had team rugby first. And leading up to that, there was this whole conversation with me and the guys organizing it, the media teams and the sponsors and whatnot. And then they said to me, why is it 200 Ks? Why not 160 kilometers? Make it 100 miles. It makes more sense. 200 kilometers is so arbitrary. And I stuck with 200 Ks. And I said, no, 200 Ks because that would have been in the original Makhadik crossing. One. Secondly, 200 Ks gives you potentially that third night in the middle of nowhere, which makes it emotionally way tougher. And incidentally, there was no cell phone coverage on Vermeulen. Nothing. It was like the biggest issue for all the guys in the team. It's like, you can't take out your cell phone. You can't hear from your loved ones. You can't phone anybody. You can't browse social media. And I've forgotten why I started telling the story. Oh, yes, 200 Ks. And team rugby was first. And so there was this idea, and I was adamant, no, it's going to be 200. And each team had 96 hours in which to complete the course. So with team rugby, we get to kilometer 110, 120. And the Oaks are smashed. Blisters on top of blisters. John Smith and Yanni Shimangi skulk Brits. So we all know skulk Brits as the chirpy guy, the cheerleader. And everyone openly admits that's why he went to the Rugby World Cup. He was not in probably the top 4 hookers in the country, but he'd been playing international Saracens for 10 years, and he had that attitude, that spirit that kind of pulled people up. And he ended up captaining South Africa in one of the World Cup games. And when was it? 2016. All the guys, including myself, were absolutely smashed. And Scott would be half dead until the TV crew arrives. And then he'd like flip 180 degrees and TV Skulk arrives, doing the speedo walk. But we get to 120 and these guys are smashed. I'm going, shit. What if these guys don't finish? Maybe we should have made it 160K. And somehow we kind of just think that everything's going to be easy. John Smith's words, oh, sure, how difficult could that be? At the end of the 200K, so the big story is I spent 3 nights on a salt pan with 3 hookers. But at the end of that, Skulk Brits comes to me and says, Eric, you got my number. Lose it. Don't ever phone me again. So there's the adventure part. So I'm not going to go through that. And then there's the challenge part. So this is summit morning on Aconcagua. And now we've woken up at 3 a.m. We've got out the tents at 5 a.m. It's minus 25 degrees. And people look at this photograph and say, what's that black shadow? What's that black pyramid in the background? That's the shadow Aconcagua casts across Chile onto the Pacific Ocean. And no one sees this because it's behind them. And then you like zigzag up this slope for the entire day. But how often do we challenge people? How often do we challenge ourselves? And at the end of the day, challenge is what allows us to move forward. This whole idea of motivation and what it is ultimately this idea of we have a current self where we are right now. And without realizing in our subconscious, we have this ideal self or a future state that we aspire to. And the gap between where we are and where we want to be, that is the origin of motivation, which is counterintuitive on mountains. Because if you're there, that's not a great place to be. Where would you rather be? No, back down where it's comfortable. Not up there. There's something completely irrational that drives us to when we're uncomfortable and we're not breathing and we're hypoxic. There's something completely irrational that drives us to now continue to a more dangerous place, driven by something that makes no material difference in your life. Because once I've summited Aconcagua, or guys I know that have summited Everest, whatever, you come down from that and you come home and you're still stuck in traffic, you're still queuing in the supermarket. Nothing in your life changes. But yet there's this thing that drags us. But for me to guide these expeditions, what do I need? What do people need to believe? They need to believe that explore is distinctive, that explore is relevant, and that explore has credibility in order to lead that expedition. Take this into your business, into your leadership. Right. Your business is in the current state. You have this ideal future state that you'd like your business, your team to be in. The gap between where you are and where you want to be, that's why you're here. To help each other out, that's where the motivation comes from. What if this is how your customers think about your business? What if this is how your customers think about your brand, and that people will buy your stuff because it allows them to move from where they are to where they want to be? How distinctive are you? Because guaranteed, there are hundreds of other businesses that do what yours does. As much as we like to think, oh, you need, no, we're not. How distinctive are we? How relevant are we to solving that particular problem? Mark mentioned it earlier. And then what credibility is it that we have? And so when we take this back into our business, we need to understand that adventure is an outcome that's uncertain. Challenge means we're facing that uncertainty every day. And then we start talking about the buzzword in management the last couple of years is change. I mean, the client conference I was at yesterday, probably, so I won't say who the client is, probably one of the worst conferences I've been to in 20 years. As much as me and my team tried to help them, eventually we were just invited to be there. We did absolutely no work Monday or Tuesday and yesterday, but we were paid to be there. No overt theme to the conference. In fact, the theme that was mentioned but wasn't branded anywhere was, you see, now I can't even remember. But they throw this buzzword out, change and change management, the whole day. Like they had one of the best keynote speakers I've heard in 20 years. I was speaking yesterday. He's the now Chief Strategy Officer for Nando's, Doug Place. He was CMO for Nando's. I mean, if you guys, Gustav, if you're looking for a speaker, this is just like off the charts brilliant. And literally he just talks about what Nando's did without knowing what they were doing to build a brand that is today has a brand valuation of 28.7 billion rand. But as for the rest of it, you know, they talk change, we have to change and change management, but it's just a word that we throw out all the time. When we're on mountains, things change all the time. And so to say that we want to get to there by this day or at this point, that might happen. It might not. If we don't accept that and we keep pushing, we could die. And so there's this constant thing about push or pull. When do we push? And when do we pull? And I'm actually just going to jump around because I want to show you this. All right. Aren't we having a great time? All right. So that's Elbrus in Russia. It's the highest mountain in Europe. Sorry to the French. It's not Mont Blanc. And you can say we're having the time of our life there. We were in a full whiteout. We could have taken this photograph from Table Mountain last year or Melville Koppies. And so that's why we can't. But there's this whole idea of, you know, do we push or do we pull? And sometimes we get too caught up in the numbers. So my ex-colleague, Alex, him and the guy, Sibusisa Balani, became the first Africans to walk to the South Pole, like from the coast to the pole. 63 days it took them. Yeah. And what Alex and them did was in the inside of the tent, they had this timeline of where they are, where they needed to be. And obviously they had food for 60 days. And breakfast every morning was 200 mils of olive oil because it wasn't going to freeze and it's high in calories. And Alex says on Christmas morning, he thought he'd treat himself and not drink his olive oil. And he says he almost died because, but they started and they had to do 20 Ks a day ski. And after a week, they were so far behind it looked like they were ahead. So they had this timeline and they would mark it off every day. And then after a week of having now only done about 80 Ks instead of 140, 160, they're sleeping one night. Well, there's no night, right? Because the sun doesn't set. And he just, in this like silence of Antarctica and the wind, he just hears this snap, this packing noise, like a gunshot. Like, what now? Turns out he's one ski. They tied one of the guy ropes of the tent to a ski that was that they stuck into the snow. And the vibration of the rope on that ski, by pure fluke, was just the right amplitude to crack the ski. Ooh. So now they're already behind. Ski is broken. Do they push? Do they pull? And he says, like, when they hit the halfway point in terms of days that they had food for, they were nowhere near the halfway mark, but they decided to continue. And they finished 3 days after they had set themselves. So it's like now you start rationing food. On 3 weeks in Aconcagua, I lose 12 kilograms. It's a really good weight loss plan. Quite expensive, though. But it's around this whole idea then of, when do we look at the numbers? When do we look at our psyche? How do we deal with stress or distress? And I mentioned earlier that sometimes we just become too comfortable in business and in life. And right now, with mental health and wellness being like front of mind, we think that all stress is bad. But ultimately, we have two types of stress. We get distress, which is the bad one, and we get eustress, which is that discomfort that feeds from that gap between where we are and where we want to be. Right. Now we can plot this. If we have people in our business who are highly activated, they're chasing numbers, chasing targets, they want to be there, but they also have high stress because no matter how hard I work, I'm barely keeping up, we're not really making target. What do those guys suffer from? They suffer from anxiety. Now everything is tiresome. When you're anxious in sport, your muscles aren't working nicely together. When you're anxious on a mountain, walking with someone who's not anxious requires more effort, more energy, more exertion. So what happens? You start just getting more and more tired because high stress. Now you get people who move in this anxious state, and they then go, well, no matter how hard I work, nothing changes. So I don't really give a shit anymore. So they move from high activation to low activation, but their stress remains. Shit, I could lose my job, or I've got to pay these bills, or, as business owners, you guys feel that as well. Now, high stress and low activation, you're just constantly tired. As je nog minder lust om iets te doen.
So how do you define activation?
Activation is your interest in doing what it is that you're doing, how activated you are. Motivation falls under activation. Yes, When you so then you end up in this whole concept of, you're now stressed. You're not really interested in what you're doing. Your activation's low. So then you go, well, I'm just going to remove myself from this stressful situation. And now you don't really care anymore. So you now begin to experience lethargy. How many people in our businesses are there? These are the guys that have resigned, but they're still on the payroll. Right? But quiet quitting. The best place to be, though, is low stress, high activation. Right? And when we experience low stress and high activation, we see excitement. And this is where everyone starts in your business. This is where you were when you started the business. Right? This, it's not that stressful. Geez, this is interesting stuff. And we're going to change the world and we're going to make a difference. We're highly activated. And you experience that excitement. It's really useful to ask yourself, and maybe just look at the people in your team, in your company, ask your managers to do that and see, where are our staff? Where are they in terms of stress? And then you probably could find a tool to measure this, but casual observation is good enough to tell you whether someone's stressed out and, whether they're feeling anxious, excited, whether they've checked out and they're just coming out for the good coffee. On expeditions, we kind of take this one step further. And Christoph, you're the psychologist. You could probably pronounce Mihali's surname.
Yes, so that.
Top right-hand corner, in italics. Anyway, sports psychologist. He died a couple of years ago, so we don't have to worry about pronouncing his name.
And then you sneeze loudly, rapid.
Sneeze. But what? That's close enough. Yeah. Csikszentmihalyi. What he discovered is there's this continuum between our ability, our skills and competencies to do something, and the challenge that we face having to do it. So when, those dead bodies on Everest who were once highly motivated, overestimated their ability and underestimated the challenge. Now, when challenge exceeds So when you get to the extremes, you withdraw or disengage. But when the challenge exceeds your ability, to a large degree, it leads to anxiety, distress, burnout, or death on Mount. So we've openly said that we will lead Everest expeditions, but we're not taking people just because they can pay the bill. There has to be certain criteria that people have to meet before they go to Everest with us. So high challenge and low ability leads to worry, anxiety, distress, and burnout. But as your ability improves at the same level of challenge, you get to this magic space of arousal equal to excitement. Right? Conversely, when your abilities are too high and the challenge is too low, and this is what I find very often in many teams, is we employ people with massive abilities and then we don't provide them with a significant enough challenge.
Also the other guys.
Yeah. And so they become bored. But as the challenge increases at the same level of ability, they begin to relax or they experience a sense of control. And what Csikszentmihalyi says, when there's this perfect mix between challenge and ability, we experience this emotional state of flow. And flow is where we feel we have purpose, where our effort feels effortless, where time begins to stand still. We've all been in that space where we worked on a project, and before we know it, our wife's phoning us from home going, "Where the hell are you? Dinner's getting cold. You're still at the office. It's 9 o'clock at night." Right. When there's that perfect mix between challenge and ability, we have this sense of flow. And how do we create an environment in our teams where that stays? Team rugby on Battle of the Sports. The challenge was really just way above their ability. And yet they kind of dragged themselves through because the rugby culture is very much fun. And, you know, we all the teams, we got on a plane at OR Tambo at the Fireblade Aviation with the Oppenheimer's private air wing. And we flew straight into Vermeulen on a PC-12. To what's the town? Kennard. Where the rugby guys go when we got to Kennard? Just take a wild guess. Straight to the pub. Brandies and Coke all after me. Right. Team running, because we had team comrades, 2 comrades, record holders, and a lady, because Nick Bester was attacked a couple of weeks before we were meant to go. But what did team running do when we got to Vermeulen, to Kennard? They literally all put on their running shoes and went for a run. I'm like, and when we then got onto the pad with team running, I told them in all our pre-event stuff that I can pull this cart, I know, 6.5 kilometers per hour. But runners don't work in kilometers per hour. Runners work in minutes per kilometer. They heard 6.5 minutes per kilometer towing a 300 kilogram cart. They practically killed me. And in fact, that first night, they did have managed to get that cart to roll into me, and I slipped 2 discs in my back. Right? It speaks perfectly to this idea of ability and challenge. The guys who got this just right, the best team to be part of, was Team Cricket, which was the last team to go. So I couldn't say to any of the other teams what the previous teams' times were, because while I was part of all the teams, I was also not part of all the teams. But Team Cricket, Lance Klusener, Makai Ntini, and Mondi Zondeki were the fastest team to 50 Ks, even faster than the runners. Fastest team to 100 Ks, because before 100 Ks, the runners had crashed into me with the cart, and they broke the cart. So the aluminium cart had to be taken off and try and find someone that can weld aluminium in the middle of the Northern Cape. Not easy. But Team Cricket literally just had this idea of, we know where our ability is. We can kind of figure out this challenge. So we kind of set this process for ourselves to kind of stick to. And part of that process is we're never going to put anybody into difficulty. We're going to have this good balance between fun and commitment, and we'll make it happen. It was the best team to be part of.
What was the first game?
Cricket. So it was rugby first, then road running second, soccer was third. That was Matthew Booth, Teko Modise, and Siyabonga Nombete. Third fastest. So when the awards were done, against my advice, running was awarded the fastest team because their overall time was the fastest, despite the fact that they had outside assistance, which was contrary to the rules of the event, which I wrote. But so that was the interesting experience on Battle of the Sport as well. And that as much as it was my idea, with some inputs from this guy, Clive, who helped find the sponsorship, I was eventually completely railroaded in the entire event and just became the expedition leader. Very confidentially. I mean, we went through this whole process prior to register a business, the PTY Limited, called Events to Aid, that this event would sit under. And the idea was to do this annually and for me to create different challenges. So at the end of all of this, some suppliers weren't getting paid. Some of the athletes were phoning me going, Eric, why haven't we been paid? Because they were paid an appearance fee. And then I would phone Clive and our accountant and go, what's going on? No, we've run out of the money and this and that. I said, well, could I see management accounts? No. And I said, well, why can't I see? You don't have access to management accounts because this event sits, you're not part of the event. I'm like, I'm sorry, but we went and registered a business for this event to sit under. And only to be told that no, the PTY Limited we registered as an NPO is for the fundraising part. The actual event sits under Clive's events company. And so I was then told, I have no part of this. I'm just like there. And the funny thing is they then tried, so then I was completely sidelined. And then they tried to do a second season in 2021, which never happened. And then they were going to get another adventure in and they were going to go whitewater rafting. And I told them all of this stuff, you can't manage the risk. No, the event never happened again. Good. But this is really one of my weaknesses is that sometimes I'm just too trusting. You're probably all familiar with, like a disc profile or a Myers-Briggs type indicator. And I use a process called the Merrill-Reed grid, which uses behavioral observation. So you get 4 styles: expressive, amiable, analytical, driver. Your calls ended because everybody left. Yes, I'm boring. And so my trust behavior style, I actually plot quite amiable. Anyone who's ever worked for me will tell you I'm driving because it's, I'll tell them what they needed to do and then I get on with it and then they catch hell if they don't. But where am I on expeditions? And on expeditions, there's this fine line between allowing everybody the space to have an experience, to understand their challenge and their ability, but also, so being amiable and creating that space, but also that element of being analytical in terms of planning, when we go, how we go, what needs to go where, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then being driving when things aren't going well and when we have to make decisions. And so there's this four kind of engagement requirements that I try and shape expeditions on. And that what people want in order to feel engaged in your business and on expeditions is firstly the sense of perceived control. What's the key word there? Perceived. Right. So on a mountain, I want people to feel that they have input, that they have a sense of control over what we do. Because if I don't, they don't take ownership of it. right? So ultimately, I'm going to make the final decision if something is dangerous, becomes out of control, is going to put us in a situation we don't need to be in. But on that desert trek that I showed you the photograph of, we basically give the team a photograph, an aerial photo, a satellite photograph every morning with the pin of where we are and another pin of where tonight's camp is. And then we say to them, look, guys, let's plan the route together. You guys plan the route. And the idea is, because there are no landmarks, right? It's just massively high sand dunes and these flat areas between them, these salt pans called subkas. So the idea is, if you want to have a good day, is you string the subkas together pretty much to where we need to go. So we don't spend all day in high dunes dragging this little cart. I mean, the cart in the rubble Kali thing is really just like our water and stuff for the day. But it becomes this extra little team member. And on the second last day of the one trip, I can see at one point, so Alex has got the GPS and the guys have plotted the route and we're just checking it on the phone. At one point late in the day, I can see Alex just getting quieter and checking the GPS more and then falling back. And I dropped back with him and we started having a conversation. There's something wrong. He goes, yeah. I said, well, what's wrong? He says, well, we're walking, but we're not getting progressively closer to camp according to the GPS, and still heads off in a different direction. The distance isn't getting proportionally shorter. Eventually we hit this fence because there's a national park in this area, which is really just a fenced off piece of desert, but the dunes encroach over the fence. So we hit the fence and we know we're not supposed to be hitting this fence. Turns out when we did the prep, Alex had dropped the pin in the wrong place on the map. So now we've got this team, we're going towards this pin, but the camp's like at a different bearing, which is why the distance isn't getting shorter the way it should. Right, so what you do as the leader when you cock it up. So we got the guys together to go, hey, we've messed this up. And this is the situation. We're not lost. We know where we are, but in relation to where we think the camp's like more this way. And you know what? Out of everybody on that team, only one guy just wasn't happy with it and had a vloermoer and, you know. So it's so important that for me, that we give people the sense of control, because if they relinquish all control, it's very easy to now blame somebody else for a situation that the whole team is. And in that desert, I mean, we're all here. Are we all disappointed? Yes. But what can we do about it? Being here and the camps there. Only thing we can do is start walking. Right? But people who don't assume responsibility, people who feel that they're not in control, and they're just there. I mean, in all the years we've run these trips, there are probably only 3 times we've had real idiots on a trip. And this guy really wasn't even one of them. It was just that moment that he was already tired and hutful and now still had to do. But in all the years, I mean, so we had one guy who just thought we were there to wait on him hand and foot, literally carry his bags and what. And the other guy I told you about was on Kili. And I'll tell you about the third guy a little bit later on. But so perceived control. The second, that's so vitally important, is this idea of perceived progress. And how are we progressing towards whatever goal it is that we're chasing? And we saw it with Canada. 3 days stuck in base camp with all of us. Then another 2 days stuck in Camp 1 in a little alpine tent. To her, we're just not making the progress she was expecting to make. It's quit. Like the fastest way to demotivate a team is to not share progress with them. Many years ago, we worked with AIG, insurance company, and on a retainer. And one of the projects that suddenly came up was the claims department were feeling demotivated. They went in and said, oh, guys, why are you feeling, like the main reason everyone's feeling demotivated, think about that gap between where we are and where we want to be, is that they said, the work will never end. Well, here's a surprise. As for most employees, the work will never end, right? Otherwise, you'd be on a contract. That's all the work's done. But the real issue there was, as every time they're busy with a claim, more claims would just get piled on top of it. And they had no emotional connection. So firstly, they had no emotional connection with what it is they were doing. They had no emotional connection with the claims themselves. And there was no perceived progress, because if it takes me an hour to wrap up one, in that hour, 2 more get added to my pile. So there's like visual thing of I'm actually just going backwards. And so how we changed that was we looked at the third aspect, and we combined perceived control, perceived progress with this third concept of connectedness. And we encouraged the claims, the admin clerks, instead of just looking at the policy number and what has to be done, to try and get to know the person behind the claim. And so we realized that if they did that, and they realized that claim number 462,792 million was a single mom whose car got smashed, who has to take her kids to piano practice and water polo, and has to do the shopping and whatnot. That changed their mindset and the way they approached that claim. So now they had this emotional connection to settling a claim, and it's not just another number. Now they had a purpose. Now they were making a real difference to somebody's life through still just doing the same mundane stuff, which feeds into the fourth thing that people need is meaning. With Battle of the Sports, I mean, team rugby, 120 kilometers, the Oaks were ready to throw in the towel. Blisters, pain, suffering, the Oaks were dead. But what kept them going? Well, number one, they're on TV. Yes, actually was called. But number two is we created this purpose behind Battle of the Sports, right? And that was around raising funds for vulnerable communities affected by COVID. So we ended up, we were hoping to raise a ton of money. And by that point, I think everyone was just suffering from donation fatigue. So we raised it over $1 million. We were hoping for 5 or plus kind of million. But that meaning, a purpose beyond yourself, is what gives people drive. And I think often in our businesses, people don't understand the challenge and ability. They don't understand the fact that there's actually a purpose beyond the paycheck on this. And as leaders, we need to understand that no one comes to work in our company for our reason. They're all there for their own reason, whether that be getting their kids into private school or paying for the December holiday or whatever that is. And the closer we can create an environment where what they do at work links to their purpose. We ran a project with BestMed a couple of years ago, where we really just got the guys to focus on rewards and recognition beyond a bonus. And because we realized that when you bribe staff with rewards and recognition programs, ultimately, there are 2 ways that we can reward people. One is what we called like financial currency. You give someone a $200 voucher. So, sorry, team, we've got to work late on Thursday because we've got a deadline on Friday. So we ask people to do 3 hours overtime, and yes, we pay them for that. But then we give everybody a 200 Rand pick and pay voucher. Or $300. Let's make it easy for my maths brain. Now it's very easy to go, 3 hours overtime, it's $100 pick and pay voucher. If I ask them for the same overtime, the same like beyond the call of duty commitment 2 months from now, and I only give them $100 worth of bolt-on, they're going, no.
It's actually not bad.
No, but there's direct value with like financial currency or market currency. There's direct value. What if we use the emotional currency? What if we give them something that they can't put a price tag to? Like my ex-wife had this ugliest vase I've ever seen, right? That stood in the entrance hall on the table. Sometimes it had flowers in, sometimes it didn't. But it stood there because it was given to her by her favorite aunt as a wedding present. Right? No one cares what that vase cost. To her, it was what's invaluable. What if we can give our staff, in terms of rewards and recognition, something that has meaning for them? Like, and I'm going to use a dinner with John Smith, right? You can't put a value to that because it's not the value of the steak and the bottle of wine that you can have. There's value beyond that, right? And so how do we balance this market currency with emotional currency? Any questions? I don't even know how much time we've got left because my watch.
This is sort of the time I wanted to leave 15 minutes for questions. So you want to do closing?
Yeah. So let me wrap up with, I mean, I could tell you a horrible story, but let me rather wrap up with this. I showed you that photograph earlier, the partnership model. And this, I mentioned the fact that when you start any new challenge, when you start any new adventure, the kind of overarching feeling that you have with something that's new is, I just call it glee. I think of a personal relationship, you know, if you're married, when you first met your wife, or when people first started your business, it's like, this is the best place I've ever worked. You know, that's your significant other when you meet them those first couple of months, or the most amazing relationship I've ever had. But what happens after a period of time? We realize that along with the glee, right, there is a fee. You know, in your business, there's a fee. Sometimes we work overtime. Sometimes clients are just difficult to work with. Sometimes my manager gets emotional. My girlfriend leaves her dirty underwear lying all over the bathroom floor instead of putting it in the washing basket. But what happens when the fees in a relationship begin to outweigh the glee? We drop below what I call this line of awesome. The narrative within here in any relationship is me. My clients say to us, you don't respect my needs anymore, or you're not delivering on time, or your prices have become too expensive. And when my girlfriend says to me, Eric, you never tell me you love me anymore. But I told you 6 months ago. I'll tell you if anything changes. And when the relationship becomes all about me, what's the next easiest thing to do? Put on your rhyming caps. When it's all about me, the next easiest thing to do is to flee. So our customers leave, they go and find a different supplier, a different product. Or our staff leave, they go and work somewhere else. Or they resign, but they stay on the payroll. They flee emotionally, but they still come to work because no one else will hire them. But we've all been in personal relationships. We've all been in business relationships where we've experienced the glee. The fees have increased. We've felt undervalued and underappreciated. And we've been at the me stage, but we don't flee. So why don't we? Well, number one, because divorce is ridiculously expensive. No, we stay in a relationship because ultimately we can see what's possible through me. That's why we stay. And one last mountain story. 2020, we had a black guy who was aiming to become the first man of color to do the 7 summits, or the fastest man of color, to do the 7 summits. He went to Vincent with me in Antarctica in December 2019. We're on Aconcagua 2020. And look at it around against the partnership model. 4 or 5, we get to base camp. 5 days into the expedition, Zach comes to me and goes, look, we need to change our expedition protocol. We need to change our expedition plan. He's preparing, so he was doing Vincent, Aconcagua, Kili in February with me, and then we're going to do Elbrus, and we're going to do the whole 7 finishing with, Elbrus in August, but Everest in April, May, Denali in June. Anyway, so we've got this whole journey mapped out, and he's booked us to do all of it. We get to day 5 on Aconcagua. He says he needs to spend more time at altitude. He's preparing for Everest. He needs to change the acclimatization protocols. No, Zach. Number one, we've got 4 other climbers with us. This is the protocol. Trust me. You don't climb Everest now in January. You climb it when you get there in May. Oh, but he doesn't like my answer, which is process-based and experience-based and taking all of this into account. He phones Alex in Joburg. He says, Eric, this is what we need to do. Eric won't let me do this. Alex says, no, I agree with Eric. Next morning, Zach comes to me and goes, right, that's it. He's leaving the expedition. He's found another guide who will do what he wants them to do. Pays him another $3,000, leaves the expedition. Weird thing happened. The minute he left my team, the whole team culture changed. He was just one of those divisive guys in the team. All about me. Ego, me, not worried about anybody else. So he leaves. I got COVID on Aconcagua in 2020 to the point where I eventually had to send the team up to Camp 2 without me on summit. I waited a day. Well, we only realized afterwards that I had COVID. I was just treated for early onset pulmonary edema. And I went up to, so then I waited another day at base camp on a rest day. Team went up to Camp 2. So they went Camp 1, Camp 2. I did base camp, Camp 2 in one push. As I go up through Camp 1, Zach, this guy's coming down through Camp 2. Full-blown pulmonary edema, half dead, helicoptered out, was told by doctors to not even consider going to altitude or mountains for 2 to 3 years after. I then caught up with my team at Camp 2. We did 2 nights there, and then summit camp and summit. In the morning, we left for summit camp. I had gurgling on my lungs, sure sign of pulmonary edema. Turned myself around, said to the team, I've got to go. I can't become your problem. And half of them summited without. Now, how redundant do you feel as a leader when you get that kind of success rate without you? And I think it just boils back down to everything that I've shared with you in terms of how we create this environment through rituals, through routines, through empowerment, through understanding challenge, etc. To get the team into a position where if something happens to us, they can actually continue. Were they worried about it? Hell yes. Like I said to them, guys, but you can't get lost. You're not going to fall off when you literally just follow the path. Do what we've done in the pre-expedition sessions and all the theory and all the medical, and everything is in place. You literally just need to go to camp, summit camp, sleep, eat, go to summit and come back. And they managed. So, yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.